Welcome back, everyone! My name is Jesse, and today, well, you may be wondering, Jesse, what are you doing? There's no cinematic to talk about, there's no analysis. Where's your guest host? Where's the podcast? Where's the lore video? This is none of those things. This is something, potentially, the start of something very new and very exciting. Or, you'll never see it happen again. You guys will decide at the end of this. I'll decide, one of us will decide. I haven't decided who is going to decide, but this may be a thing. And if it is a thing, Lost Codex Legends? Does that sound? How does that sound? That sounds pretty good, right? Right? I like it. Doesn't matter what you think. Today's hot topic that we're going to talk about is actually just that, hot topic. Wrathion himself. A lot of people have been wondering, ever since that new sexy model came out for 8.2.5 PTR, who is he? What's he about? I didn't play Mists. I don't know his story. I did play Mists, for the record. And today we're going to talk about that. We're going to dive into a little bit of his backstory, a little bit of his character and personality, and what he may be up to in the future, in the close future. So here's, for those of you who don't know, here's a little quick history on our boy Wrathion. Now, Wrathion's origins start with a red dragon by the name of Rheastraza. Now, Rheastraza and a gnome by the name of Dr. Hieronymus Blam. What a name. What an awesome name. Work together, and they want to free the corruption from the Black Dragonflight, and that's not an easy task. And so they conduct some experiments. We find out that Rheastraza, before we realize that she's a dragon, has a black dragon captive, kind of forcing her to lay eggs. Kind of dark, a little bit of a darker start there. And with the use of a Titan device called Eye of the Watchers, this device purifies the old god corruption from a dead whelp, a random black dragon egg, and an egg taken from the black dragon I just mentioned. Her name is Nyxandra. Now, Nyxandra, hope I'm pronouncing that right, is a sister to Onyxia. And together, it's not explained how, but this device purifies both eggs and the dead whelp, and that forms into a purified black dragon egg. So already Wrathion's got a little bit of a weird start, kind of like a Frankenstein start, but that's okay. That's all right. We're gonna skip ahead. The Black Dragons try to hunt down Rheastraza and the egg. They end up killing Rheastraza. Deathwing himself kills her, but the egg is saved and sent to the Vermilion Sanctuary up in Twilight's Highlands, where the egg is kept for a couple months during Cataclysm. Towards the end of Cataclysm, the egg is stolen, and we learn that it's stolen from Ravenhold rogues. Rogue players, with the help of the Wormrest Accord, are sent to recover the egg from Ravenhold, and you find that the egg has hatched. And this is where we meet Wrathion for the first time. Now, most players, if you didn't play a rogue, chances are you didn't get to meet Wrathion until Mists of Pandaria. But for those of you who played rogues during Cataclysm, Wrathion is a really interesting questline in which you help him rid the world of all other black dragons. He knows that he is a one-of-a-kind situation, so he thinks. He knows that everyone else, that is his siblings, cousins, whatever, they're all corrupted, and so he sends you, an assassin, to start killing all these other black dragons. And Wrathion is the only black dragon that he knows of at the end of the questline. Mists of Pandaria comes around, and we meet Wrathion up in the Tavern of the Mists, and he's sort of like this secretive, sort of spy master character with some agents all around, and you find out that he's invested in the Alliance and Horde war, but not for profit, not for personal gain. He finds it's a waste, it's a distraction, and it's a threat because the Burning Legion is coming, and we're too busy killing each other to realize that. So he has a goal that he wants to chase. He's kind of vague, but he helps you. Doesn't matter your faction. He helps the Alliance and he helps the Horde. I'm really speeding through Mists of Pandaria here. When the factions land in Landfall in 5.1, he helps both sides. And then after Garrosh dropkicks Anduin, and Anduin's recovering up in the Tavern of the Mists, that's where Wrathion meets Anduin for the first time. And because of that encounter, sparked thousands of fanfictions and Tumblr art and everything, and sparked a really cool relationship between Wrathion and the Prince of Stormwind at the time. Little fact that I forgot about that quest line, during this quest, Wrathion and Anduin are playing a Pandaran board game called, forgive the pronunciation, Ji Hui, and in Ji Hui, both sides are meant to win, which Wrathion finds ridiculous. It's a stupid game, why play? And the philosophy of the game is if one side is clearing the board faster or winning, the other side is supposed to surrender. And it's considered a dishonorable move for one side to absolutely clear the other player's board entirely. Even though it's technically a win, it's considered dishonorable. It's not considered proper in this game. And if you and your opposing player have the same amount of pieces on the board at the end of the game, it's considered a perfect, honorable win. And Wrathion is confused about this. Now, this is not winning and having both sides win. This is a theme that will come to play later on. But we learn that Wrathion becomes fascinated with Lei Shen and the Thunder King, and Anduin finds him not fascinating at all. And Wrathion goes on to learn about the Mogu and Keeper Ra-Den and what the Mogu's purpose was after the Titans. A lot of the Chronicle lore Wrathion learns back in the day. Wrathion has the player bring him the Heart of Lei Shen. After we go and kill the Thunder King, we bring him the heart, and he pulls a Khaleesi and he eats the heart, much to Anduin's disgust. And he has this moment where he is overcome by this vision in his head, and he sees a million perfect worlds, and then he loses himself for a moment, and we hear another voice. It's not his. I believe it's Thul talking through him, but it could be any of the Titans. And the voice says, "We have fallen. We must rebuild the fallen Titan. Do not forget." In which then he comes back to his senses and he forgets all of it, or so he claims. Similar event happened involving Lei Shen and Keeper Ra back in the day, when Lei Shen entered the lowest vaults in Pandaria and found Keeper Ra languishing in his doubts and his depression about the learning that the Titans were dead. Ra touches Lei Shen on the head and shows him this vision. And so in the same way, Wrathion is given a vision here. And I thought that was pretty important for Mists of Pandaria. Wrathion continues to dabble in the faction war. A bunch of stuff happens with the Cloak of Timeless Isle. And we find out that he's siding with Garrosh. He was actually banking on the Horde to win until the Horde's turn on Garrosh, until he says half the Horde turned on Garrosh. He then swapped sides. A lot of Horde players were pissed off at the end of the questline, because at the very end, after you defeat Garrosh, you learn Wrathion was actually back in the Alliance. He was back in the Horde. Garrosh lost support. Wrathion changed his support for Varian. And when Wrathion learns that Varian not only spared the Horde and didn't absorb them into the Alliance, but actually offer them a chance at mercy and a second chance, Wrathion is pissed. He wanted this super army, this super faction for the Burning Legion, and that didn't happen. Things get weird with Wrathion after this. We know he's at the trial for Garrosh Hellscream and continues to develop his friendship with Anduin. They have lunch together, they talk, and the grand reveal at the end of the book is when Wrathion is helping orchestrate Garrosh's escape with Kairos to alternate Draenor. We all thought Wrathion was going to show up in Warlords, and he kind of did. He was present in Admiral Taylor's garrison before it fell to cultists. That's not important. And we know he was at Khadgar's tower briefly. Burning Legion shows up, and the dude's nowhere to be found. He's wandering Azeroth, according to a BlizzCon panel. And we meet him during the Death of Chromie scenario, which is... Alright, now he's at the Black Dragonflight Shrine, which to us means nothing at the time, but what if it did mean something? What if he was up to something? Well, we know he was up to something. We're going to get there in just a second. And then Battle for Azeroth, Wrathion pops up again. We bring a Black Dragon scale from the Island Expeditions. We bring it to him, or we try to. His agent intercepts us and tells us that Wrathion is looking for other Black Dragons. Turns out the rogue quest line was totally... well, he didn't know about all those extra Black Dragons, I guess. He was like 2 hours old. Give him a break. Wrathion is looking for other Black Dragons to interrogate to locate the Dragon Isles. The first time the Dragon Isles is ever mentioned in lore, which is important. So, what has Wrathion been doing? Well, and by the way, this next part, that was Wrathion's history. You now know Cataclysm, Mists of Pandaria, and the last 3 expansions in which he appeared only once. Through each expansion. This next part is spoilers for 8.2.5. So if you don't want to be spoiled on Wrathion's storyline and what's happening, don't watch this next part. So we learn that Ebonhorn, another black dragon that Wrathion did not know about, who is also free of corruption, is at risk of corruption because N'Zoth is now free. And we're sent to find Wrathion to help him. We go to the Tavern in the Mists, the very first place that most players meet Wrathion, and we find left and right his lieutenants. And they're waiting. Wrathion predicts our arrival, and he leaves us a diary page, or leaves with them a diary page when we read it. And it turns out Wrathion has actually been visiting a couple libraries over the last couple years. He's, in this particular diary, he references the Shandryn library, in which case he's reading about void magic, and specifically N'Zoth's magic, and concludes that maybe N'Zoth's magic can be used against him. He also sort of muses how conflict harms the pursuit of knowledge, references the Horde destroying the library because the Horde doesn't like reading, I guess, and kind of reminiscent of the burning of Alexandria and the vast loss of knowledge in the Dire Maul Shandryn library. We then, left and right tells us that finding Wrathion is going to be difficult, but they do remember Wrathion keeping an eye on Blackrock Mountain. So we go there, we find an old god minion corrupting a subject of Wrathion, and we learn that he is on his way to the Crypts of Karazhan, or that was his last known location. When we get to the Crypts of Karazhan, or rather before there, we read a journal entry again telling us that he goes back to Pandaria. He enjoyed Pandaria so much that he didn't do Warlords or Legion, he just spent the whole time in Pandaria. And aside from learning a lot from Lorewalker Cho's mentioned, the Lorewalkers are mentioned, he specifically mentions the Shadow Pen, and how, having discovered facing against the dark energy of the Shah, and how they've combated that dark energy of the Shah over the history of the Pandaren. The principles of their techniques are useful to resisting the Whispers. So Wrathion is now gathering pieces of information about Old God corruption from all around the world. He muses his kinship with the Shadow Pen to be against the darkness, and how he must make a stand. We then go to Karazhan and we find another page referencing, I'll get to this in a second, the Forge of Origination in Uldum, and how it's the key to defeating the Old Gods, but he doesn't know how that's going to be done. He seeks more knowledgeable people. The aspects have been uncooperative. He actually doesn't blame them. He doesn't blame Alexstrasza for not trusting him, even though he would probably love her help. Once we get to Karazhan, we defeat another minion of N'Zoth, and we find one more journal entry. And in that journal entry, we learn that he discovered a tonic that will help cleanse Old God corruption, which is important for Ebonhorn, and actually cease the Whispers. So that's pretty powerful stuff. He also apparently very casually mentions his whole conversation with Medivh. And when I say casually, he actually gives a lot of detail about it. But Khadgar talking to Medivh, who cares, right? That's Khadgar's deal. He does that. Wrathion talking to Medivh, that's interesting. That's unusual. And the fact that Medivh's just hanging out there, like he's not just a random ghost, from the past. He's actually present, and Wrathion talks to him. Now, whether or not that has dark implications, I don't think anything evil is going on with Medivh. I do believe all of Sargeras's garbage is gone. So it's interesting that Medivh helps him on confronting the darkness and returning the world to what it was, to make a new legacy and make amends for that. He leaves a note for us and a potion to give to Ebonhorn to cease the Whispers, and promises to fight alongside us against N'Zoth in the real battle for Azeroth. Now, personality-wise, Wrathion has had an interesting arc. Wrathion has always been a schemer in the darkness. He's always conducting his warfare from a table to enact his plans. And as powerful in his desire to do good, he still uses his elusiveness, this sort of shady, backseat dealings of espionage to get things done, while never actually setting foot on the battlefield himself. And over the course of his storyline, when we first meet him, he is calculating, he's cold. The last dragon we kill during the rogue quest line is the dragon who saved him, is a dragon in disguise as a rogue, and he even says, I owe you my life, but you're one of them. You're corrupted, and I gotta kill you. No hard feelings. He's very just. There's no trying to talk him out of it. There's no attempted conversation there. He is just like, nope, you gotta die. And I think the turning point for Wrathion was during the Pandaren game with Anduin, and how both sides have to win. And he starts to realize that this corruption that he saw as a disgusting, horrible, an insult. His flight was charged with protecting Azeroth, and all of his kind is a bunch of mindless, corrupted slaves, and he went from hating that to almost sympathizing with Deathwing, with Neltharion. After going to the Chandrilar Library and the Lore Walkers, talking to the Lore Walkers and the Shadowpan and Medivh and Karazhan, Wrathion really starts to sympathize with Deathwing, really starts to sympathize with his father, or rather grandfather, and suddenly that first Wrathion we meet who's disgusted by the corruption is suddenly gone. Wrathion obviously has matured over the last couple of years, even though he's only a couple of years old, and now he is starting to express his empathy for what his father went through and the fight he must have went through. And we know that not all Twilight Dragons are evil by nature. The ones we meet on the island expeditions, they say we had no choice. This was not our choice. This was not our path. They're fighting against the Whispers. They still attack us, but they're not inherently evil. They're not inherently bad. And that's when we learn just how much Wrathion has really changed over the last couple of years. Also in 8.2.5, we see his personality, despite his rooted in using the spies, as being a little bit more cooperative, and now he is responsive to the world around him. He was traveling the world, as according to BlizzCon 2016, and questioning at what length should be taken to achieve victory. He's no longer just stationary in his movement. He is now taking matters into his own hands rather than the player's hands, which is why the big question, where has Wrathion been all this time? Well, he's been doing things. He's been reading. He's been at the library. Leave him alone. Goals. What are Wrathion's goals? Well, we know he's looking for the Dragon Isles. We know that he's looking to rid the old gods from Azeroth. We know he is looking to protect Azeroth. And despite his shady personality and his questionable methods, his goal has always been just that, the stability of Azeroth's future. From the moment we talked to him in Pandaria, he warned us the Burning Legion was coming. Now, he didn't actually do anything during the Burning Legion, which, he's like, I told you so when he went off to read. But aside from that, he has always cared about the planet's future. Just as Deathwing did. Neltharion did Neltharion cared about Azeroth, and unfortunately fell to those corrupted whispers deep in the deep places of the earth, as the High Mountain like to warn us. And by the extension, his flight and the entire charge of his people, Wrathion is A, looking out for what his job was, and B, looking to, bring back the goodness of who the Black Dragonflight was. There's a big stain on his people, on his family, and he's looking to fix that. Granted, so far his attempts have been a little bit callous and misguided and entirely without a moral compass, but recent developments has shown us that maybe he's learned a bit. We haven't actually encountered him directly in the game, we've just read his journal entries, but maybe Wrathion's changed a little bit. Maybe he's probably still a little shit. He's always been a little bit of a sassy asshole, but maybe he's grown a little bit. The future. What about Wrathion's future? This is a quote, "A new legacy. In the end, perhaps that is what I am truly after. A way to make amends for my father's failings, as well as my own. A legacy worthy of the Black Dragonflight's original sacred charge. The defense of Azeroth. The end of the old gods. Rest assured that when the time is right, you will have my aid in the fight against N'Zoth, in the true battle for Azeroth. Oh, and one last request. Burn this journal. It is time my actions speak for me." Wrathion, despite all the dark and questionable choices, he always aspires to do, maybe not the right thing, but the good thing. He is trying to, maybe not, that's not the right word. He is ultimately trying to do what's right for Azeroth. And, Anduin even asks him in Mist, to what end? What are you two working towards? And he says, world peace. He says it, really sarcastically, but it's not a lie. Now, some tinfoil hat time. Twilight Dragonflight. If Wrathion has been learning about the whispers of the old gods and ways to combat the darkness and cease the whispering, can he silence the whispers that madden the Twilight Dragons? Can he cleanse them entirely? Deathwing created them as his perfect, beautiful flight that he was trying to do the old god's bidding for, but how poetically just reverse would it be if Wrathion takes his grandfather's flight and rids all corruption of that? Deathwing ends up making a flight that, once perfected, becomes an instrument to save Azeroth's future. What if Wrathion is able to silence? Because again, the island quotes, the mobs on the island expeditions that are Twilight, some of them say, this wasn't our choice. We didn't choose our fate. So what if Wrathion can help them choose? On that topic, Void Magic. Void Magic understanding. He believes that N'Zoth's magic can be used against him. That's pretty important in the fight to come, especially if this fight goes beyond this next patch that's coming out in terms of 8.3. Will N'Zoth be a threat for 9.0? Who knows? But if there is a much larger long-term battle to come, and Wrathion has the means to turn the Void Magic against the Void, against minions of the Void like N'Zoth, that's pretty important. Now, will he try to sell it to the highest bidder? And I don't mean in terms of profit, but gaining allegiances and collecting allies. I think Wrathion's a little bit beyond that. I honestly think that he would relinquish this information specifically to the Alliance, because the Void Elves, if the Void Elves can learn to stop the Whispering, but harness the Void completely, oh my god, the Alliance has a terrifying super weapon in their control, and the one downside to it has been deprogrammed with the stopping of the Whispering. The insanity part of the Void Elves, gone, and they're just really good at what they do. So, I really hope that storyline comes into play if Wrathion ever decides to join the Alliance. Horde get Ebonhorn, Alliance get Wrathion. That can be what he brings to the table. And the last thing is something I've always found interesting. Uldum, and specifically the Halls of Origination. Now, there's an interesting parallel between Lei Shen's story and how Lei Shen's story ends. His grand reign as the Thunder King ends at the gates of the Halls of Origination. He goes to the halls, the Tol'vir tell him, no, you can't have this device. He says, I'm going to take it from you. They turn on the Doomsday device, contain the destruction, and it wipes out the massive jungle, the massive oasis surrounding Uldum, turns it into a barren wasteland, kills all the Zandalari that are with Lei Shen and all the Mogu, and kills Lei Shen as well. That is where Lei Shen died, and that's where the Zandalari brought his body back to Pandaria after that, which is why the Zandalari were involved in his revival. Now we have Wrathion devouring the hearts, and although they didn't mention the Halls of Origination in Pandaria, I'm starting to wonder, is that where Wrathion started to learn of Uldum, of the Doomsday device there, and what's going on there? Now we do know something's going on in Uldum, and I don't mean the Hearthstone expansion. I mean specifically in the island expeditions when we encounter some of the Tol'vir, we learn that new tombs around the world have opened up with Tol'vir. They don't acknowledge the Tol'vir of Uldum, the fleshy ones. They consider them traitors, and they've abandoned their sacred charge. And they've actually rebuilt their own keepers. There was the Titan keepers like Odin and Mimiron and all that for Uldum, but we killed them. When we went in, we players, we just, as we do, we ruin everything. We ended up killing those guys. Well, now this new group of Tol'vir have rebuilt their own keepers. And there's the note that they must have a forge. Now, does that mean the Forge of Origination, or does that mean just a Titan forging forge in general? Who knows? But Uldum has been brought up in Battle for Azeroth before this point. Now Wrathion's bringing up the Halls of Origination. I would love if we returned to Uldum, and I really hope we do, because the reset button for the planet is in the middle of that desert, and I would love if we got to return to there. Could Wrathion start to dabble in Titan Keeper's affairs? Does he go looking for Keeper Ra? You know, we helped Ra in the Thunder King patch, but that's about it. What's going to happen after that? Does he go to Ulduar? Does he go to Uldaman? The Titan Keeper who empowered his dad, who turned the Black Proto-Drake into Neltharion the Earth Warder, was Arcadus, the last boss of Uldaman. He was the guy who empowered Deathwing, or Neltharion before he became Deathwing, through the power of the Titans. Maybe they're not dead. Maybe Uldaman, we didn't actually kill Arcadis, and Wrathion goes looking for stuff like that. So I absolutely love that Wrathion has been diving into these centers of lore and these little side stories that he's been going to all around Azeroth. And I really hope that Blizzard gives us a reason to go to the Library of Shandryn, to go to the Lore Walker Seat of Knowledge, to go to the Shadowpan Monastery, go to Karazhan, go to Uldum. I would love if they did that. Wrathion is pulling a very Lost Codex aesthetic right now. So I'm excited for Wrathion's future. And that wraps up today's first episode of Lost Codex Legends, name pending. Let me know what you guys thought. I know there wasn't any visuals. I know it was just me talking. I know other content creators will put a little webcam version of themselves in the corner and then fly around in game. Is that better? Something to look at that's not this? Would you rather just me talk for X amount of time? What did you guys think of this kind of format? First time me doing this, and it's a little bit more scripted than my usual senseless rants. So let me know what you guys thought. Let me know what you guys would want to see different, or what changes you would like to see. And let me know what you think of Lost Codex Legends. And as always, thank you to everyone who helped me on this. Laytis and Shandryn for your insight and helping write this script, and everyone else who gave me the encouragement and gave me some ideas to build this together. So let me know what you guys think, and we'll see you, maybe, if it happens, for episode 2 of whatever this is. Maybe. Okay, see you guys.